Imagine this. You're young, in love, and think you've finally found something real. But then, the person your boyfriend trusts most, his so-called best friend, spreads a lie so poisonous it almost destroys your entire relationship before it's even begun. That was me, back in 1997. I was just 18, my boyfriend Jacob was 18 too, and for a moment it felt like everything we'd built was about to crash. All because of one jealous, lying friend who thought he could get away with it. But here's the thing. When someone messes with your life like that, you don't just sit back. You fight back. And the revenge I came up with? Let's just say he never saw it coming. So buckle up, because this is the story of how one toxic lie turned into one of the pettiest, most satisfying revenges of my life. It was 1997. The kind of year where CD players and giant speakers were a big deal, and walking to the neighborhood bar with your best friend was considered the highlight of a weekend. And back then, I was just a young woman, for months into a brand new relationship with a boy named Jacob. He was only 18 at the time, shy but sweet, and honestly the kind of guy who made you believe in good men. He wasn't perfect, he was still figuring out who he was, like we all were at that age. But when he smiled at me, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. But there was a shadow in our lives. That shadow had a name. Stinky. Yeah, that's what we all called him. Stinky. He was 19, Jacob's so-called best friend, and unfortunately my roommate at the time. And let me just say this right now, Stinky lived up to his name. He was the kind of guy who'd leave dirty socks in the living room, dishes stacked in the sink, and an air of sleaze that made my skin crawl. Still, for Jacob's sake, I tolerated him. I didn't want to be the girlfriend who forced her boyfriend to pick sides. I figured, he's Jacob's friend, he can't be that bad, right? Oh, how wrong I was. One night, my best friend called me up. She wanted to hit the bar together. It wasn't unusual for us, just two girls having fun. I turned to Jacob, asking if he wanted to join us, but he shook his head. I've got work early tomorrow, he said, kissing me softly on the forehead. But you go have fun. I trust you. Those words meant the world to me, because when you're young and in love, trust feels like the most fragile thing in the world. You guard it carefully, terrified it could shatter at any moment. So Jacob went home, and I walked down to the bar. It wasn't far, just a few blocks away, close enough that I felt safe. And that night, honestly, was nothing special. We laughed, we danced a little, we shared inside jokes that made the time fly. By 2 a.m., the bar was closing. My bestie gave me a tight hug, slurring slightly as she promised we'd hang out again soon. I waved her off, ready to walk back home. And that's when he appeared. Out of nowhere, my ex-boyfriend stepped into my path. The look on his face was smug, almost rehearsed, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. You can't walk home alone, he insisted, his voice dripping with fake concern. It's not safe. I'll walk with you. Something about the way he said it, it wasn't protective. It was controlling, like he still thought he had some claim over me. I straightened my shoulders, trying to make my voice as steady as possible. I'm a grown woman. I'll do what I want. Then, without waiting for his response, I started walking. My heels clicked against the pavement, echoing through the quiet night. But behind me, I could hear him, his footsteps. He was following me. By the time I reached my house, my heart was pounding. And that's when I noticed Stinky. He was awake, lounging in the living room with my youngest sister, who was only 16 at the time. My sister spotted my ex and immediately jumped up to hug him, which honestly made my stomach turn. I didn't like the familiarity between them, but I bit my tongue. For about 15 minutes, we all stood around, awkwardly chatting. My ex acting smug, Stinky pretending like he owned the place, and me just wishing everyone would go to bed. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, Stinky and my ex started arguing. Not about me, not about Jacob, not even about anything important. Just some stupid nonsense, two insecure guys puffing their chests at each other. I'd had enough. All right, that's it, I snapped. Time for you to go. And everyone else needs to head to their rooms. Now. I wanted peace. I wanted quiet. I wanted this weird, uncomfortable night to just end. So my ex finally left, Stinky sulked, and my sister disappeared into her bedroom. I went to bed, thinking the worst was over. But little did I know, this night was just the beginning of something that nearly destroyed my relationship. Because by the next afternoon, Jacob would storm into my place with fire in his eyes. And the reason? A lie. A lie so cruel, so calculated, it almost tore us apart. The next afternoon, there was a pounding on my front door. Not a polite knock, not even the kind of impatient knocking you'd expect from a friend. No, this was furious. The kind of knock that rattles your chest and makes you instantly anxious. When I opened the door, Jacob stood there, his face flushed red, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. "What the hell? Opie's name!" he shouted, his voice trembling between rage and heartbreak. I blinked, stunned. "Jacob, what are you talking about?" But before I could say another word, he practically exploded. "Don't play dumb with me. Stinky told me everything. He told me you slept with your ex last night." For a second, the world just froze. His words cut through me like a blade. My stomach dropped, my ears buzzed, and my whole body went cold. "What?" I whispered, barely able to breathe. "That is a lie. Jacob, I swear to you nothing happened." But he wasn't listening. His eyes darted back and forth, his fists opening and closing like he was trying to hold himself together. Stinky wouldn't just make that up. He said he saw it. He said. I didn't let him finish, because something inside me snapped. "Are you kidding me? You're going to believe him over me?" I demanded, my voice shaking but rising with each word. I could see the war happening inside Jacob. He loved me, but he'd known Stinky longer. That so-called best friend bond was clouding his judgment, and watching him doubt me. God, it was like someone was slowly squeezing the air out of my lungs. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I turned on my heel and marched straight up the stairs. My sister, my witness, was still in her room. I threw her door open. "Tell Jacob what happened last night," I demanded. She looked between us, wide-eyed. "Nothing happened," she said firmly. "We all just stood around talking. Then X's name left. That's it." Jacob's face faltered. For the first time he looked unsure, but the damage was already done. That seed of doubt had been planted by Stinky, and I knew. I couldn't let this go. My blood was boiling now. The betrayal wasn't just in Jacob's hesitation. It was in Stinky's audacity. He had crossed a line you don't come back from. So without a second thought, I stormed across the hall to Stinky's room. I didn't knock. I didn't wait. I kicked his damn door open. He jumped up from his bed, startled. "What the hell?" "Opie's name," he stammered. But I was already in his face. "You lying piece of trash." I screamed, my whole body trembling with rage. "How dare you try to destroy my relationship? How dare you spread lies about me?" He smirked. He actually smirked. And that smirk, it lit a fire inside me I didn't even know I had. I shoved him hard. He stumbled back, his arms flailing. "Get out of my house!" I shouted, my voice cracking under the weight of my fury. But instead of leaving, he had the audacity to push me. Right there at the top of the stairs, his hands shoved against my shoulders. My body teetered backward for a split second, and in that instant a thought flashed in my mind: if I fall, I could die. That was it. That was the moment something primal in me took over. I grabbed him by his shirt, planted my feet, and with every ounce of strength in my body, I shoved him. Hard. He tumbled down the entire staircase, crashing against the steps with a sickening thud until he landed in a heap at the bottom. And you know what? I didn't feel guilty. Not one bit. Because when someone tries to ruin your life with lies, sometimes the only language they understand is being shown just how powerless they really are. Jacob rushed past me, his eyes wide. But I just stood there at the top of the stairs, my chest heaving, my hand shaking, but my heart screaming with one truth: I will not let anyone tear my life apart. Stinky eventually stumbled to his feet, limping out the front door without another word. He didn't pack, didn't explain, didn't fight back. He just left. And as the door slammed shut behind him, I thought maybe this nightmare was finally over. But I was wrong, because Stinky wasn't gone for good. And when he came back for his things, that's when my revenge truly began. For a few days after I shoved Stinky down those stairs, the house felt lighter, like the air itself had been cleared of poison. Jacob was calmer, too. He apologized for doubting me, swore that he knew in his heart I would never betray him. And though part of me believed him, another part still hurt. Because no matter what he said now, he had believed Stinky's lie, even if only for a moment. That sting stayed with me. But Stinky? He stayed gone. Word got back to me that he was crashing on a buddy's couch. And I thought, good riddance. Let someone else deal with his stink, both literal and figurative. But then a week later, Jacob came over with news that made my blood pressure spike all over again. He said he'll be back next week to pick up his stuff, Jacob muttered, trying to be casual. His stuff. His precious electronics. Stinky didn't have much of value, but oh, what he did have he worshipped. A Sony 5-disc CD carousel, a Sony amplifier, and a pair of Paradigm speakers that he bragged about non-stop, as if owning them made him some kind of king. Back in 1997, that setup was the crown jewel of any bachelor pad. It was the kind of thing guys invited their friends over just to show off. And suddenly, as Jacob spoke, I felt this spark flicker inside me. A thought so delicious, so wicked, I couldn't help but smile. See, Stinky had tried to destroy my life with his lies. He'd tried to turn the man I loved against me. He'd even pushed me at the top of those stairs, risking my safety. So no, I wasn't going to let him waltz back in, grab his toys, and move on with life like nothing had happened. If he wanted his precious electronics, fine. He could have them, but not before I made sure they were ruined. That's when my plan formed, a plan equal parts petty and poetic. Late one night, after Jacob had gone home, I carried that shiny Sony carousel out of his room and into the kitchen. I set it on the counter. Its sleek, polished surface almost seemed to glare at me, like it knew what was coming. I opened the tray. 1 disc slot, 2, 3. The machine waited patiently, oblivious to its fate. And then I reached for a jar of Bravo pasta sauce. Thick, red, sticky, the kind that clung to everything it touched. As I twisted the lid off, the smell of tomatoes and garlic filled the air. I tilted the jar over the carousel, and slowly, almost ceremonially, I poured. The thick sauce oozed into the tray, coating the delicate mechanisms, seeping into every crevice. The carousel swallowed it whole, unaware that its soul had just been drenched in acidic ruin. I shut the tray, wiped my hands, and then I smiled, because I knew by the time Stinky opened it, it wouldn't just be ruined. It would be disgusting. I unplugged the machine, carried it carefully to the front door, and left it there like a neatly wrapped gift. For days it sat, the heat of summer doing its work, the pasta sauce turning moldy, sour, rancid, until finally Stinky came back. I heard his footsteps on the porch, the shuffle of him lifting the box, his muttered curses, and then the door slammed shut and he was gone. I never saw his reaction when he finally opened it, but I heard through the grapevine what he found. Mold, rot, a once glorious stereo system reeking of spoiled tomatoes and garlic, its insides forever corroded. When Jacob heard about what I'd done, he just shook his head, half disturbed, half impressed. That's extreme, he admitted, but I looked him in the eye and said, messing with someone's things isn't nearly as bad as messing with someone's life. And in that moment, I knew justice had been served. But the story doesn't end there, because years later, when the dust had long settled, Stinky confessed something that made my blood run cold. Years passed. Jacob and I built a life together, brick by brick. We survived Stinky's lies. We survived the doubt. And through it all, our bond only grew stronger. By the time a decade had rolled by, Stinky was nothing more than a faint stain in the rearview mirror of our lives. Or at least that's what I thought. Because then, out of nowhere, came a confession. I didn't hear it from him directly, at least not at first. Word filtered back through mutual friends, people who had known him in those chaotic years. And what he admitted was this. He had lied. All those years ago, when he told Jacob that I had cheated with my ex, it was nothing but a fabrication. He had invented it, knowing full well it could destroy us. Why? Because he was jealous. Jealous of Jacob. Jealous of me. Jealous of the life and love we had built together, even in those early, fragile months. That's when it hit me like a truck. Everything we'd been through, the screaming fight, Jacob's doubt, me throwing Stinky down the stairs, all of it had been set in motion by one thing. One man's toxic envy. And as if that wasn't enough, there was more. Because Stinky's poison hadn't just seeped into my life. It had touched my family too. Over the years, I began to piece together stories, whispers, connections I hadn't wanted to believe. Like how my youngest sister, the one who was only 16 the night Stinky spread his lies, had started acting secretive around him. Or how my other sister, years later, gave birth to a little girl but refused to say who the father was. The more I dug, the uglier the picture became. Because Stinky hadn't just betrayed me as a friend. He had crossed every possible line of decency. He had slept with both of my sisters. And to this day, there's a very real chance he fathered my niece. Even now, when I think about it, I get that sour taste in my mouth, the mix of disgust and rage that no amount of years can ever really wash away. This was the same man who had nearly broken me and Jacob apart, who had looked me in the eye as a friend and smiled while stabbing me in the back. And suddenly, that pasta sauce revenge didn't feel so petty anymore. If anything, it felt merciful. Because compared to the damage he tried to cause, compared to the lives he twisted and corrupted, all I did was ruin a stereo. A stereo for a soul. Honestly, that still feels like a bargain. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this. Sometimes the universe doesn't hand out justice on its own. Sometimes you have to create it yourself, even if it's with a jar of pasta sauce.